Will you wave again if you can hear me okay? Hello. Just setting some stuff up. I've got a little bit of a itinerary or agenda. We'll wait for some other people to show up as I get organized. Just checking to see if video and audio are okay. Just getting an idea of the stuff that we're going to talk about. I have some ideas, but you are all welcome to ask questions and offer up other things to talk about as well. I'll be shooting in landscape mode, so if you want to turn your phones sideways, you can do that. I think it'll work if you keep your phones upright as well. So as we're waiting for more people to join, I'll give you a little bit of a show and tell. What you're seeing here first is my all-American quilt, and it's pretty zoomed in. I don't think I'll be able to zoom out on a whole lot of stuff, but you can see that the stars are appliqued on. They're quilted around, stitched directly onto the denim, and then quilted around, but everything that you'll see here on this quilt is made out of denim. I hand quilted it using different colored threads, and that's representative of what I think all-American means. So you'll see different colors, you'll see reused thread, you'll see some new thread in there, but it was all quilted with some big stitching there. The back of it looks like this. And so it's a royal blue backing, and you can see that the stitching goes through on both sides. The next one is one of my waistband quilts. And my waistband quilt is made up entirely of blue jean waistbands. And so you can see how the lines of waistband are right there, And you can see buttonholes, rivet holes. We have a 4-month baby here at home, so if you hear some yelling, it's because we're having a rough time putting her down for her bedtime. So please excuse that. So we've got some buttonholes that I include in this quilt. You can see rivet holes there as well. And then as part of the show and tell, I've got a few other things here as well. This is currently my stash of waistbands. And I've got them organized this way so that I can have them all in one place, but also to help start the pressing or the flattening process. I've got them all rolled up like this, and you can see that this end is where the main rivet or the main button was, and at the other end you can see where the buttonhole was, and now there's a couple of openings there as well. But that's how I have my waistbands organized currently. The other thing that I want to show you are some of the extras that I harvest. Some of the extras that I harvest from a pair of jeans. And so I've got a lot. I'm going to try and shine a better light in here. But I've got a lot of belt loops. And most of these are intact, depending on how I could get them off of the jeans. And I've started to undo them as well. And so this is labor intensive, picking out the stitching. Some of them are glued tight, but you can see the beautiful fades and non-faded areas in there as well. And I've got some ambitious plans for these flattened belt loops. It takes a lot of time, so I'm not sure where I'm at with that. But I just want to show you some of the stuff that I get from a pair of jeans. This is a small part of my collection of thread. Hi, Cecilia. And you can see that there are a lot of different colors, a lot of different weights, a lot of different thicknesses of these threads. I use business cards. I use scrap denim to wind these up. I use sometimes the Levi's label of where the size of the jeans is located. I roll that up and I'll wind up some thread on there. I'll use tags, but we'll talk about it later. But one of the main things that I concentrate on is trying to avoid using as many new things as possible. So a lot of what you see here has been reused, reclaimed, repurposed in some way, including these clothing tags, including scrap denim, including bits of cardboard. I think this one here, you can see the T, this T of the Trident gum. So it was a little packet of gum that I was using to wind up that thread. We've got leather patches that I've picked off of different pairs of jeans. Some of them, I think some of you have seen that some of these turn into leather thimbles that I use for hand quilting. I've got a bunch of rivets. I've got a bunch of scrap denim. As my scraps get smaller, the projects get smaller as well. This is a new pouch made from jeans zipper fly, scrap denim, and the inside here, what you see is purple, is what used to be a men's button-up collared shirt. I'll scoot that over to the side. We've got a bunch of zippers, and these are recent zippers that I've harvested. These are mostly blue jean zippers. I'm gonna dump other zippers onto here, but these come from other slacks, other jeans, other pants, khakis, corduroys, slacks. I've got a rainbow of colors. But for the most part, in more recent harvesting, I've been getting a lot of these navy blue, traditional blue jeans zipper flies. And I use these for pouches, and another ambitious plan is to make a quilt with functioning zippers, and it's an idea in my head. I'd like to see it come to fruition at some point. These are pockets, front pockets of jeans with rivets. We'll talk about rivets in a little bit, but just wanted to give you an idea of, I make pouches out of these as well. Some of the zippered pouches that I just showed you, I'll make them with the pockets included. I love using these pockets. There's a lot of character in them. There's a lot of function left in them. And so it's one of the cool things that I can use for different projects. Some of these other pieces that I'm about to show you include different parts of a pair of jeans. Let me make sure they're in view. And so what you see here toward the middle are a part of the jeans that where the zipper fly is sewn into and applied into the jeans. This is the opposite side. So one side of the zipper, it goes and attaches to this. Another side of the zipper goes and attaches to this piece. If you have your pair of jeans in front of you, you can open up where the zipper is and see one half on this side and the other half on the other side. And when this is opened up, unpicked and opened up, you can see these beautiful areas of non-faded denim and beautiful areas of really wonderfully faded denim. And so again, I want to make a quilt or something out of those pieces. Ambitious ideas, time and resources are what is limited. And so here is a zipper still in that part, and so you can see one side of it that it's attached to and this other part that I'll pick apart and open up into one of these areas here that looks awesome, flat, and wonderfully colored. These pieces that I've got centered here now are the part of the jeans and the back that go between the waistband and the pocket. And I use that piece for reference, but these are, I don't even know what shape to call them. They're kind of triangular in shape, but again, I collect those as well with big ambitions to make something out of them at some point. So I hope we have a bunch of people here. I had a bit of an itinerary just to look, and I'm looking at some of your questions. Where do you get all of the jeans from? Let's see, All Grown Up MH. Thank you for your question. Where do I get all the jeans? That's a great question. Some of them are my own. Some of them have been thrifted. Some of them have been donated. I've made a couple of connections, a couple of relationships with people. One lady at a local thrift store, I asked her a while back, she's a friend of mine, and I asked her a while back where the denim goes, the stuff that they can't sell, the stuff that has blowouts, it's damaged, it's out of fashion, they can't sell it for whatever reason. She comes back a few days later with a trash bag full of unused, used denim, used blue jeans. So I have another lady, friend of mine. Her name is Kathy. Kathy, if you're there, hello. And she uses all the other parts of the blue jeans except for the waistbands and the zippers. And so she gifted me a bunch of stuff, and I've had a lot of fun picking those things apart. Thank you for your question. Rebecca Nelson, thank you for your comment. Hey, Heidi. For those of you who know me, I assume that you know Heidi because Heidi is a rock star. But if you don't know Heidi, look her up. Heidi, let me see. I'm trying to make sure I credit you correctly. Heidi.Parkes, Parkes. That's her handle. Go look her up. She is amazing. And a lot of what I do here has been inspired by Heidi and her stuff as well. So I'm Eliu. I'm the guy here, the magician at Made or Remade. I take different clothing, different used materials, and I make other stuff from it. I came across it, quilting, not by accident, but about 9 or 10 years ago. I made my first quilt, and I made it out of khaki pants, and that's what I realized, that while I made a cool quilt, I love the process. I love making stuff. I have a bit of condition. It's not even a condition. It's just my attention gets all over the place. So I'm watching television, I'm playing with my baby, I'm talking to my wife, I'm on my phone, I'm doodling, I'm doing all kinds of stuff at the same time. A little bit of ADD, but I find that quilting, especially hand quilting and doing some of the unpicking and taking these waistbands apart, is very meditative in nature, and I love doing a bunch of that stuff. So that's part of why I make. I like making, I like being green. But I think one of the big things is the process and how much I love that I can bring my thoughts and center myself a little bit around using my hands. And so when it comes to my philosophy, I like to subscribe to the idea of creatively green. Creatively green to me means that I wanna be green in the way of reuse, in the way of the environment, in the way of avoiding new things, in the way of avoiding throwing things away. And so this quilting journey that I'm on, I've been finding that there are more and more ways to do those kinds of things, to be creatively green in quilting, and specifically quilting with reclaimed, reused materials. And so I think I've shown you a little bit, but I want to reclaim as much as possible from a piece of clothing, from a bed sheet, from a button-up collared shirt, more specifically here from a pair of jeans. I want to reclaim as much as I can. And so I've shown you a little bit about that. The rivets, the button flies, the scrap denim that's not really scrap, the waistbands, all these kinds of things, the belt loops. And you can see how I save a lot of it. I consider myself a collector. My wife calls me a hoarder. And so we disagree on a regular basis. And I think a lot of that disagreement is where I store my stuff. And so that's how we do that. Another part of my philosophy is to harvest as much material as possible, from the parts of the jeans to the zippers to the pockets. And when I do that, my design, whether it's a quilt or another project, a lot of that design is dictated by the materials. And so I've never used a pattern in my life, not for quilting anyway. I've never used a pattern, and I tend to do repetitive kind of design. So I'll take whatever it is from a waistband or pieces, and I'll just start stitching stuff together, start piecing stuff together in a repetitive way. It's asymmetrical, but I think there's a lot of cool stuff in that repetitive nature. So if you all have any questions, you can ask them here, and I can answer some if I see them. I'll keep looking and seeing if you have questions. All grown up MH, what tools? Yeah, I'm gonna get to that here in just a little bit. But when I'm describing some of my stuff, I call it asymmetrical, I call it flawed, and in a lot of cases I call it perfect because of that imperfection, because of the character, because of the imperfections, because of the little, what some people call errors, some of us call character, and in a different, we look at it in a different way. And so, yeah, all grown up MH, and some of the rest of you as well are wondering what I use to take apart some of these things. And so I do want to show you a little bit of that. Disclaimer, don't hurt yourself. And so I'll be using some tools that you see here. I have an X-Acto knife. I have what are called angled diagonal pliers. I'll show you what those are for in just a little bit. I use scissors, I'll use tweezers, but my favorite tool is your traditional seam ripper. And I buy the cheapest ones for a couple of different reasons. One is that, Karen, I'll get to that question here in just a little bit, but I have these cheapo seam rippers for a few reasons. One is going to be that they break sometimes, and so I'll just use a different one. I have them stored in different places. I have one at my office. I have two here. I have one downstairs. I have them in the car. Anytime I want to pick something apart, I have one of these cheap ones here. And so that's why I use these kind. But don't hurt yourself. We're using some pretty sharp tools, and the first thing I want to let you know is that I don't want you to stab yourself or cut yourself or anything like that. So I use one of my thimbles. This is heavy duty leather thimble from patch of one of these pairs of jeans. And what I do with that is I use that to start picking apart. Some of these waistbands. And so I hope I'm zoomed in okay, and I hope the light's okay, but where I get that, I'll get in here with my seam ripper, and I'll start picking apart the belt loop from the rest of the waistband. And so this is a little bit labor intensive, but if you do it carefully, you'll pick apart a nice belt loop that's intact, and you'll be left with a little bit of a scar on the waistband. An unfaded area, real nice color. And on the flip side, you want to pick apart those stitches as well. And this is some of the prep work that I really recommend that you do for us to harvest some thread, because I am going to talk about harvesting thread. These are some of the tools I use, but the prep work includes removing all the belt loops, all the buttons, rivets I'll get to in just a little bit, patches, labels, any of that kind of thing, because when you remove all those things, it leaves you room for removing that thread. And the lines of thread that we're looking at are one line on the upper part of the inside and one line on the lower part of the inside part of the waistband. And when I flip it around, you'll get two more lines, one up and one down from that same waistband. So let me find one of these. had some jeans that I had prepped for this specific purpose. And so these are the jeans. I've already picked apart some of the waistbands. On the flip side, when I remove the waistband, or when I remove the belt loop, I have that thread that you want to remove. And the reason I remove this is because if you don't, it can interfere with the picking apart of the thread that we want to harvest. And so again, remove the belt loops, remove any labels, patches, anything like that. And I think I'm almost done with this one. So again, I would insert my seam ripper in there, cut out those stitches, but I also want to show you the way I can do it with an X-Acto knife. So again, be super careful. I don't saw with the blade. What I do is I press. It's super sharp, and so I press with the blade like that against a protected finger. And I'll remove, and easy peasy. You have a belt loop that's intact, and you've got a waistband with a little bit of a scar on it. And again, you go to the back side and you pick apart some of those threads. And now we have this waistband almost fully prepped. Again, the belt loop off, pick apart the thread, and we've got a waistband that is free of labels, patches, and belt loops. And so again, just making sure that everything is off. And this is where the fun starts. For those of you that came to see how I harvest a waistband, I harvest thread, this is it. So if you go to the end of the waistband where the main rivet is, what a lot of us call the button, where that button is, you flip it to the inside and you pick apart these first few stitches with your seam ripper. And over here, I've already done that. So I pick apart that. I open up that end of the waistband as well. All right, watch this. And I hope you can hear it because it's such a satisfying little popping sound. This. And that sound is the thread, which is a slip stitch or a chain stitch that just comes undone. And I'm trying to get my lighting and my hands out of the way so that you can see that. So all the way around to the very end where your buttonhole is. And from there, you can snap it or you can cut it off. And then this is the thread. I hope you can see it. Let me see if I have a better background. You got kinky thread, kinked up thread that you just pulled off of that. And so I want to show you how I test it and then wind it up. But it's all kinked up, and I think maybe we've got some zoom in there. Paper Diva, it is magic, and I think that every time I pick them off. Karen, here is the thread without breaking it. And so it's all kinked up, and what I do with this point is I give it a good tug from one end to end, and this accomplishes two things. One is it brings the kinks out of the thread. This is an area that's kinked up, and I think you can see that. And then the thread that I just pulled, that I just tested, is straightened out. So I give it a good tug from end to end for two reasons. One, it gets the kinks out, and two, it tests my thread. And I need to test it because if it frays, if it breaks, if you hear a little popping sound, or if it's too worn, where there's knots or little lint balls or something like that, you don't want to use that thread. So I'm going through and I'm pulling, testing the entire length of thread, and I don't know how long it is, but I'm guessing it is probably close to 12 or 15 feet in length for this pair of jeans that has a size 34 waist. And so that's a lot of thread. And so I'll wind that up. And I'll put it off to the side. I have so much thread around. Some that I haven't wound up. It's hanging off of my lamp. It's hanging off of my sewing machine. I've got it hanging off this television that I use to watch some Netflix when I'm sewing. But you wind it up and you've got about 12 or 15 feet of awesome high quality thread. One of the questions I get, Rita, I will answer your question here in just a little bit, but one of the questions that I get is how much thread there is, and so I just showed you that. And then on the flip side of that same pair of jeans, so we just pulled off the lower inside part of the waistband. Rita, I start at the end with the main rivet. And I think all jeans are different, but I know Levi's and a lot of men's jeans have that kind of stitching. So where I start at the main rivet, I pick apart those stitches and I go and pull. Because if you start at the other end, you are not going to get very far at all. So if you can't get it at the one end, go to the other end and start there and see if that makes a big difference. Because over here, again, I'm starting and I'll pick apart a few stitches. And then I hope you can hear that. I'm going to be quiet. That little popping sound is what I want to hear. I will pull the rest of that off later. But right now, the other part of the magic that I want to show you is now that we picked off that line of stitching that's holding the waistband to the jeans, now you can run your finger underneath. Listen. And that is the sound of the waistband coming apart from the jeans. And then you come around and there is your waistband. So I will move my jeans off to the side and we will play around with this waistband a little bit more. And so waistband harvested, thread in the process of being harvested from the upper line of stitching from the waistband. And again, I'll wind that up. Rita, I hope that answered your question. Yep, I see you. Hi, Stephanie from Spontaneous Threads. Happy to see you. Entropy's always wins. Hi, Doc. Thank you for joining us. Hi, Shelly. Yeah, that's one of my favorite sounds. It's so cool to see you all here. I look up to you as makers and quilters, and so thank you for joining me. Okay, so that's 2 lines of thread. Now you flip from the inside of the waistband to the outside of the waistband. We already have it removed. And you start pulling the thread from the other side. And so again, as I pull it, it's kinked up. Give it a good tug. Give it a good tug, and it tests the thread, and it also helps to straighten the thread. It won't give you perfectly straight thread, but it'll give you something that's easier to work with. So all of this thread that I'm harvesting, I use to mend I use to hand quilt. I'll go back to the waist knot quilt here in just a little bit, but you can see how I used this reclaimed thread to quilt the entire quilt by hand. And if I mention Heidi's name too many times, you'll forgive me. But I listened to one of her lectures recently where she talked about series and making a series or making a collection of art, whether it's quilting or something else. And I am on my third. I finished my third waist knot quilt, and I think it's considered a series, if not a collection at this point. And so that lecture got me thinking a little bit differently of how I make and what I call it. But thank you to Heidi for some of that information and inspiration. And so the last line of stitching from the outside upper part of that waistband, I will take and, ooh, did you hear that? It snapped. And so that thread I won't use because, yep, it's breaking every time I test it. And it just depends on the location, the wear, the part of the jeans. And so, yeah, that thread I won't use. Question here from Karen. Cotton or poly or something else? I think it's a nylon thread. I don't know for sure, but it's heavy, heavy duty. And while a lot of thread has an expiration date or some kind of lifetime, this thread that is holding a pair of jeans together is heavy, heavy duty. And it is meant to last a long time. If you look at a pair of jeans that's been worn over years or decades, you'll notice that the thread, a lot of the thread is still intact, where the denim itself has worn down. And people will toss that stuff, toss a pair of jeans because the denim is worn down, even though the rivets are still intact, and in a lot of cases the thread is still intact as well. And so that's a good question, Karen. Thank you. Stephanie, somebody needs to record the sounds of deconstructed denim. I hope I'm recording this. This is the first time I've done this kind of video, so I hope it's recording. And if that's the case, then you can go listen to it and maybe fall asleep or get inspiration in a different way. So now that we have the waistband, this area with the buttonhole is sewn in the shape of a teardrop for that main rivet to attach so you can wear these jeans. So I will pick apart that side, and I want to be careful, but I don't want to be too careful. I will make a hole. I understand that. I use that hole as character in the final piece if I decide to use it. If you don't decide to use it, if you want to cut it out, that's your prerogative as well. But I do want to use my seam ripper very carefully to open up that buttonhole so that I can open up the waistband fully. And we'll get to the rivet removal here in just a minute. But I do want to flatten this. I do want to flatten out this this waistband, so I'll show you how I'm doing that. And so if I were a little more careful, I would have done better. Instead of having that buttonhole look all chewed up. I'll show you how I repair that here in just a little bit. But this way, I have everything flattened out. And that's what the backside looks like. A little chewed up, like I said, but I still like to use that part of the blue jeans, that part of the waistband. All right, so if we get to the other end where the main rivet is, what we call the button, this is a wonderful, easy way to remove that rivet. And so in the past, I tried grinding it off, I tried prying it off, I tried all kinds of different things. And what I tripped on, what I found accidentally, was that this tool here, angled diagonal pliers, they have this real heavy duty, sharp edge. I'm trying to rotate them so that you can see them. This pair of pliers, I use that sharp angled to get underneath, and with just a little bit of pressure, I have that rivet popped up in just a few seconds. If I squeeze hard enough, I can cut through it, but like a lot of this other stuff, I want to save the rivets. I don't know why yet, but I do want to save the rivets, and so being careful allows me to save more of those big buttons, big rivets. And so there, it's almost popped off without cutting through it. And sometimes you cut through it even if you don't want to. But again, there's going to be a little damage to the buttonhole. And I ended up cutting through it. But there will be a little damage to that hole, that opening. But it's less damage on this rivet side than it was on the buttonhole side. And so once I flatten that area out again, I open it up. And from here, I will roll it up as evenly as I can to get this stored in my box of rolled up waistbands. Question: Paper Diva, can you use the reclaimed thread in your sewing machine? Two-part answer. I would not recommend it, because if you mess up your sewing machine, I don't want to be responsible for it. A lot of the thread that I use, that I harvest here, is really thick in nature, heavy duty thick, and it won't run well in a traditional sewing machine. There are other parts of the jeans that you can harvest a little bit thinner thread from, and that thread I have experimented on my machine with different levels of success. But for intents and purposes here, I would say do not run this thread through your machine. Do not blame me for any damage caused to your machine. I've done it, good and bad, but yeah, I wouldn't recommend it. Good question. Karen, I will record at the end of the video, otherwise it won't record. Yeah, thank you, I will do that. And some of the thread I've used in bobbins, some of the thread I've used on the top side, again, with varying degrees of success. I'm taking a drink. I'm taking two drinks, actually. One is going to be water to hydrate, and the other one is going to be a little bourbon, because it's been that kind of day. All right, so the same idea with removing some of these rivets. You can remove some of the rivets from the pockets, from this part here. Some of them are around the pockets, some of them are around different seams. They reinforce some of these seams so that they make your pocket stronger. Some of these areas that really wear down easily on a pair of jeans, they'll reinforce them to make them stronger for whatever reason. I like using these pockets with the rivets, so I won't remove them from that. But if you ever need to remove the smaller rivets, that same tool will make really short work of those rivets. A little bit of pressure, be safe, keep your fingers out of the jaws of your pliers. But you can get these at any of the big box stores. You can get them on Amazon. You can get them online in other ways. These are 10-inch angled diagonal pliers. 10-inch angled diagonal pliers. And they make really, really short work of rivets. The big ones, the small ones, all of them. So again, just a little prying. It's not even cutting, but I remove that rivet, the back of the rivet, and the front of the rivet. And I want to use these for something. I just don't know what. So if you have any ideas, I'm open to suggestions. Cheers, Heidi, and cheers any of you who are enjoying a glass of wine or a beer or something else. I'll do one more rivet just to give you an idea of how easy that is. And that one bent, the back of that bent just a little bit. Sometimes I can straighten it with a pair of pliers, a regular pair of pliers. Sometimes that doesn't work. So I will pinch it there. And that way, potentially maybe, I can use that rivet again at some point. So I'll just set it in there easily without pressing it too hard. And that way I can maybe use it again for some reason at some point. I don't know the when or the how. So the pair of the jeans that we removed that waistband from, bedazzle with the rivets, that's a great idea. So there are other parts of the jeans that we can harvest thread from, and these won't be as lengthy in terms of the quantity of thread, but I wanted to give you an idea. If you want to do a small mending project or a quick stitch or something like that, you can harvest thread from the back vertical seam. I'll turn it the right way. This vertical seam that goes between your cheeks, between the butt on the pair of jeans. On a traditional Levi's pair, I pick apart from the top. I'll do both lines there, and oops, somebody didn't do the prep work here. So the belt loop attached on the outside, I forgot to remove the thread the way I preached, and so it got in the way. But once you go from the top, you pick apart those stitches, the sound of magic. And that'll go all the way down to the crotch. And once you get to the crotch, the inside of the jeans, you can clip that, and you've got yourself probably about, if I'm stretching it out, testing it, probably about 4 to 5 feet of thread. And again, it's not much, but if you want to do a small mending project, that's a good line of thread to have. I'll do the other line as well. And the reason I'm undoing both of these is because I'm going to show you some other areas to harvest thread from as well. If you ever get stuck, go easy in with your seam ripper and see if you can pick the stitch without cutting it, without ripping it. And sometimes that little nudge will get you the rest of the thread without too many breaks. One of the questions that I saw earlier today was, how do you get the long lengths of thread? And so I'm showing you part of it. Another part of it is sometimes you get hiccups along the way from the age of the jeans or from the fraying or the wear of the jeans. There are different reasons why you might have areas that don't give you a smooth, perfect line all the time. And if you want to direct message me or make a comment later, I can tell you more about that. Over here, on a normal day, I would pick apart the side seam, but that's a heavy duty one, and so it requires a little more time. But the reason I would pick that apart is to get on the inside this interesting, almost triangular shape of jeans below the waistband and above the pocket. That's also going to give you some thread. And let me see if I have it here. Yeah, this one here I saved specifically for that reason. And that looks like it was chewed out of a pair of jeans, not done very resourcefully or carefully. So that was probably me just cutting it out. But you go to one end, and I don't know which end it is here because they look the same, but you pick apart stitches at either end and you can test there. And I'm not getting an easy thread removal, so I'll go to the other end and pick the stitches there and test. Listen to that. And so this is a short length of thread. Maybe you use it, maybe you don't. It's about 15 inches. Give it a test pull, and if I can use it in a small project, I will. So I'll do the other line as well. And there we go. Thread removal. You flip that out because you've already removed the 2 lines of thread on the inside. Now you go back to the outside and you can do the same thing. Pretty easy as it comes apart. That way you're not using your seam ripper on all parts of the jeans. And so now you can see where I removed the thread. You wind that up, you test it out, you get straight, and then you store it, and you can see the lines where I removed that thread. Watch how easy the 2 pieces of denim come apart. There's no thread holding it together, and so there's nothing really holding it except for the folds that they use to reinforce some of those seams. So that goes in my pile of patches that way. And then this one, I might make a zipper pouch at some point. From that same pair of jeans, I am flipping them inside out. Flipping them inside out. The outside, the outseam I think it's called, is serged for fraying so that it doesn't fray too much. But the other stitch is going to be a similar type of chain stitch, and you can harvest that thread along the outside of the outseam. If you go to the inside, the line of stitching that goes from the inside of one ankle up the crotch and down to the inside of your other ankle, that is a long bit of harvestable thread. And so again, I don't know which end to pick off, so I'm going to start with the one side. We'll see what kind of success we got, and check it out. Easy, 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 all the way up into the crotch. Let's see how smooth that is. And then it looks like I'm going to have to nudge it a little bit, encourage the thread, and then down the inseam of the other leg. Normally I would undo the bottom hem so I can get the most yield of the thread but for what I'm doing now, I'm going to get a super, super long length of really high quality reusable thread from the inside inseam. And so I'll give it a test. I'm going to step aside so that I can hang this without taking the time to wind it up. But I'm going to set it right over here on the side. And again, if that wasn't the correct end to start picking it apart, you go to the other end, the other ankle inseam area, and you pick apart those stitches and try to start there. And this line might not be as easy to remove as the first one. So just a little nudge there. Yeah, that's not going to be nearly as easy, and sometimes I don't know why that's the case. And so it looks like I'm picking almost each stitch, and I'm not going to take the time to do that. Just know that sometimes it doesn't come as easily as we would like. Yeah, so I'm not going to do that. But once you get the two inside lines, the thread harvested, you go to the outside and you pick apart that thread, and you can harvest that as well. And that's on the outside. You can hear that sound all the way into the crotch and down the other leg to the ankle on the other side. And if I was good, I would have flipped the jeans right side out. Thank you, Maria Magnolia. And if I were to estimate, man, I would guess, I don't know, 30 to 40 feet of thread from one of those lines of stitching. And so again, I'll set it aside. I'll wind it up later. I'll test it and make sure that it's not frayed or broken or damaged in any other way. But that's a lot of thread for your mending, for your quilting, for whatever you want to do. And you're using, in a creatively green way, more of the pair of jeans than any of us thought possible. I'm setting that off to the side. And so on the out seam, again, some of that stitching, that blue thread that you see there, you can do a little harvesting there as well. And I'll pick apart one end and see if that's the correct one. And this is by the hem, the lowest part of the jeans. And it doesn't look like I'm getting much success there. So I'll go up high toward the hip or the side pocket. I wanted to talk a little bit about construction as well, but I don't think I'm going to have the time to do that because I do want to wrap up within the next 3 or 4 minutes. But this was my process for harvesting usable lengths of thread from a pair of jeans. Waistband, inseam, above the pockets, above the back pockets is another place to harvest. And then on some pairs of jeans, you'll find on the outseam that same kind of stitching. This is a navy blue, really thick, heavy-duty thread, and I got the right stitches picked. And so the popping all the way down to the lowest hem of that. I'll give it a tug to test. And I estimate that I've got about 12 feet of usable thread there. And again, if you go to if you pick apart that other seam, you'll get the other side, you'll get the opposite line, the reverse line of that same thread. So a lot of areas on a pair of jeans to harvest thread from. I don't want to do the math, but if I had to, I would say close to 150, 180 feet of usable thread from a pair of jeans. You don't want to do this to a brand new pair of jeans that you can wear, that you can have somebody else wear. But if there's a pair of jeans that's been blown out, or it's out of fashion, or you just want to take it apart for another reason, there is a lot of reusable thread in those areas. Rivets, patches, zippers, button flies, zipper flies, other scrap denim. there's a lot of material that you can get from a pair of jeans. And if some of you have constructed a pair of jeans before, you'll know some of the labor that goes into making them. I am taking some time and some labor to undo and take apart and harvest some of these materials. So I'm going to wind up. Thank you so much for joining me. This has been great. If you have any questions, reach out through direct message, or I hope to post a recording of this here shortly. So you can message me directly, make a comment. The other thing I'm asking of you is to share or tag a friend, or make sure to pass this information along in a different way. I am also available for consulting, for teaching or mentoring, or whatever you want to call it, at $50 an hour. You are welcome to reach out and get some instruction, some private instruction, some one-on-one kind of coaching for deconstruction, for construction, for tossing ideas around as well. $50 an hour. Contact me directly and we can talk about setting something like that up. Otherwise, I hope you all have a good night, and I hope that you learned maybe 1 or 2 or 10 different things about reclaiming more materials. I'm Eliu at Made or Remade. I will leave this running for just a little bit longer. Thank you so much. I really appreciate it. Good night.